Hi, this is Martin Drummond, Thursday, October 31st. Live, impromptu. Just going to talk about stuff.
Everybody know the reason why we're in the problem. Dylan had laid it out earlier in that other video, but this gets more to the point even. Here's Barack Obama, and here's why we have Donald Trump. Because people were so desperate and so sick and tired of George Bush and Dick Cheney, and they wanted health care, they wanted a functioning banking system, they wanted a living wage, they wanted stuff that their government was supposed to bring to them, and Barack Obama did this instead.
My policies are so mainstream that, if I had said the same policies that I have back in the 1980s, I'd be considered a moderate Republican. I mean, what I believe in is
fucking over regular people. And so did you ever see that videotape?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, well, welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show.
Nice to be in the loop.
Yeah.
In the loop.
So American.
Okay, I don't know if I've seen that exact video, but I've heard it referenced a million times.
People have never seen this, like people who don't watch my show. I mean, this was, I think, for a foreign television show. So Americans have...
And yeah, I'm pretty sure that I've seen video of him saying that. And you know what? Americans don't really think of Barack Obama as being to the right of Ronald Reagan. I mean, Ronald Reagan brought us the deregulation that caused 2008. He brought us endless wars. He maintained the surveillance state. He did the droning. In those ways, yeah. Might be on par, but you know what? I mean, not really. And what we have to remember is that Barack Obama represented the opposite of Ronald Reagan. He may not have done it in practice, and yeah, he may have been a piece of shit president just like Ronald Reagan, but he fooled a lot of people. So to portray him as being, I mean, you can kind of portray him any way you like, but the fact is, he pushed the country towards universal health care, even though, like I said, he didn't actually do it. I mean, Obamacare is definitely great for really poor people. I mean, people like me, we get all of our health care for free. We don't have an income, but it's come at the expense of lower class working people more than anybody. So, while I applaud him for helping the poor, he's driven the whole country, the lower class of the country, down,
Never seen this unless they watch my show. And so that's the real problem. And now we have
Joe Rogan and Tulsi are both Americans.
Oh.
So they are Americans who've seen the show.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Americans who have seen the show.
Right.
Right. But yeah. And so you don't see a lot of chemistry like this. It really clicks the way we're clicking. There's never an awkward moment. The way we know we finish each other's sentences in the wrong way. And
Exactly.
So that's the problem. And then you have millionaire journalists. I showed you this last week. Here's Jonathan Capehart. Reminders that Democrats, who cares if the eventual nominee only meets 80%, heck, 50% of your checklist. Evicting Trump should be the most important item on that checklist. Now, that's obviously a millionaire who doesn't have any problems because he doesn't give a fuck about what Democrat runs against Trump because he doesn't have any problems. And this guy says, I'd vote for a turd with the D beside the name. And this guy says, my guess is you already have. So that's, to me, that's the problem. So and that's all they have left. They forget that's how we got Trump. In fact, I tweeted this out.
But, you know, Jimmy, do you really want to keep pushing Tulsi, who really doesn't have any kind of track record? And when, you know, why can't we get behind Bernie Sanders? This doesn't make any sense, you know? And, you know, whether she runs as if she runs as an independent, she's not going to win anything. She might get a small percentage of the vote. I mean, everybody's chipping away at Bernie Sanders. Don't you guys like Bernie Sanders? I mean, Bernie Sanders has got a chance, at least, at moving this country towards a sustainable platform, you know, something that's going to work over time. Come on, Bernie, get some better music. These guys suck. Is that Jane?
And fight for Bernie, the way Bernie fights for us. And that's why I'm so happy to be able to help welcome our next president to the first Bernie's Back rally in New Hampshire. Thank you so much.
No, I don't think that's her. Kind of a look-alike. A younger Jane
Give a
Sanders.
warm welcome to Julia Dazeski.
She's the next president of the United States? Okay, come on. Look, we're an hour and 22 minutes in here, and we finally get Bernie.
Let me thank Eli Horowitz, our campus organizer.
And he's going to spend 20 minutes thanking people, right?
And together, we are going to end that obscenity. So let me give a heads up to the top 1%. Yeah, under a Bernie administration, you are going to be paying more in taxes. We are going to end the absurdity of companies like Amazon, which made $11 billion in profit last year, owned by the wealthiest guy in America, not paying one nickel in federal income tax. That is an obscenity. They don't pay taxes, and 500,000 Americans are homeless tonight. We are going to be changing national priorities in America. That's for sure.
Okay, that's what I like to hear. I mean, we've really got to end homelessness. We've got to end poverty in general. And, you know, and it doesn't have to bankrupt the country. I mean, when you raise people out of poverty, you create an asset. Okay, you create people who are less likely to commit crimes, more likely to work on building a new America. Uh, it's just a win-win situation. I don't know why anybody can't get behind Bernie, you know. Everybody's got to have their own, you know. I grew up in an America where there was this vast movement for individuality. And yeah, I get that. But you know what? Individuality that is not doing anybody any good, I really don't see the point. You know? It's time for us to come together. You know, you can all be individuals behind your guitar, or I mean, how can we have a government that's determined by 325 million people who all want to believe all kinds of wacky shit, right? So let's get behind the one candidate who says he wants to raise the standard of living starting from the bottom. I think, you know, anybody who can't see that working from the bottom up is the way to do it is just an idiot. I mean, trickle down, come on, man. You know, I mean, we've known trickle down was bullshit since Ferris Bueller, you know. The Lapper curve, right? I mean, every little American like me growing up saw that. I mean, I was already beyond having to learn about that, but the rest of America knows. So I don't see why we want to get behind anybody else. Andrew Yang doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a universal basic income, but first, before you have a universal basic income, you have to put bandages on where America's bleeding to death. So the housing crisis, end foreclosures, keep people in their homes, find ways for them to move around the country, because that's caused by employment, right? You get a job somewhere else. Find a way for somebody, and find a way for Americans to not be bled to death, right? So that they can participate in capitalism without being ruined, so that every time they get a paycheck, it doesn't just go right out the door. Americans desire security, just like anybody else in the world. So they want to know that they live in a country that's going to make sure that they're not ever homeless, that they don't ever struggle to put food on the table, that they have transportation, that they have electricity. You know, these things, they're so basic. How is it that any American can't understand why Bernie is the number one choice? And even if they couldn't, I would say, man, give them a chance, you know? Let's try the experiment and see how it works. And that's what the rich are afraid of. They're afraid that the experiment will happen, just like what happened with Obama, you know? We found out that that Obamacare is better than the capitalist for-profit system. And now they're afraid that Americans have seen too much, you know, and they want more. Well, Bernie is more. Why would we want a cheap imitation like Warren? Why would we want a crazy capitalist experimenter trying to talk us once again, and after 100 years of promising us how capitalism is going to cure everything? who, all of them, Buttigieg, all of them. Why do you want to? Why do you want the next experiment that starts in 2020 to be done by somebody who is either a cheap imitation or doesn't have a very, they don't have, I don't feel secure in their presidency. I don't feel secure in Warren because she reminds me of just every little housewife who's just clawing her way to the top, just to claw her way to the top. I don't feel like she really cares about the American people, and I don't feel like she has satisfied me. Even if she proved to me in every way that she's exactly like Bernie, there's so many things that I've heard. Well, I just don't. I can't do it. I can't do Warren. Another Hillary Clinton. She sat down with Hillary Clinton. She sat down with the DNC. I can't do it, man. And all the rest of them. They're just not the real deal.
But it is not only a rigged economy in which the very rich are doing better than at any time in modern American history, while half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Do you all know what I mean when I talk about living paycheck to paycheck? Yeah, I gather you do. All right, I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. And that means the stress is enormous. It means you worry about what happens if your car breaks down and you can't afford to fix it, can't get to work, you get fired, you can't take care of your kids. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you worry that if you get sick, you can't afford to go to the doctor. In the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people should not be living under that kind of stress and anxiety. But it is not just economic inequality.
See, so he's proposing putting band-aids on all those things, and not just band-aids, but casts and, massive, proper healing of our economy.
And let me be blunt about this. The current political system is corrupt. Under the current system, exacerbated by this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, billionaires, multimillionaires, corporate executives are able to pour as much money as they want into super PACs. Well, I don't need a super PAC. We are running a campaign of the working class, by the working class, and for the working class of this country.
And even so, though he says that, we know that he's also worried about the person homeless on the street. He mentions it all the time, so he's going to be covering that.
And while some of my competitors in the Democratic primary process are off, sitting in the living rooms of billionaires, what I am proud to tell you is that as of this date, we have received more contributions from more Americans than any candidate, not just in this campaign, but in the history of American politics at this point.
And that's what tells us that the polls are off, right? And the million volunteers, all that.
And I want to say that I really get emotionally moved when I realize they do analyses of who's contributing. People who are contributing to our campaign are teachers, some of whom are taking money out of their own pockets to get school supplies for their kids. They are workers at Amazon making $15 an hour, workers at Walmart, workers at Target, people who don't have much money. People who don't have much money, but are prepared to help us win this election and transform this country. And I want to thank all of them. Nelson Mandela, who all of you know was one of the great historical figures in recent history, spent much of his adult life at hard labor in prison fighting apartheid in South Africa. Mandela said something that is enormously profound and I think applies to where we are today. He said, and I quote, "Everything seems impossible until it is done." Do you all understand what that means? Everything seems impossible until it is done. And what that means is all over this country, politicians in Congress and the media telling you, you can't bring about profound change. The best you could get is maybe a little bit of incremental change. Don't think big. Don't have a dream. Don't have a vision of where this country can go, because they say you are powerless people. It is the billionaire class that has the power, not you. And what this campaign is about is turning that axiom on its head. If we as a people don't believe that health care is a human right, we will never achieve Medicare for all. If we don't believe that it is grossly unfair that we have people in this state, in my state, working for $12, $13 an hour, unable to take care of their families, if we don't believe and understand that in the richest country in the history of the world, that is an obscenity, we will never raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. In this campaign, we are surely taking on the corporate elite with all of their greed and all of their corruption. But what is even more important in terms of the obstacles in our way is the limitations of our imagination. So what I am begging you is do not accept the fact that we cannot make fundamental change in this country and provide a decent quality of life for every man, woman, and child. We can do that. Let's go about doing it. And let me just tell you what the ingredients of a progressive agenda is about. It's not radical stuff. Politics is nothing more than saying this is where I want to go and then figuring out how you get there. Where we want to go is to make sure that nobody in this country who works 40 hours a week lives in poverty. 4 years ago when I came to New Hampshire, I said that we got to raise that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, and people said, "Bernie, you're crazy. That's too radical. it's too extreme. Well, I am happy to tell you that since then, 7 states and the U.S. House of Representatives have voted to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we have got to make sure that in America, women receive equal pay for equal work. And we have got to make it easier for workers to join unions, not harder. Four years ago, came to New Hampshire and I said, you know, the world is changing, the global economy is changing, technology is changing. We have to rethink public education in America. That's what I said. People say, oh, Bernie, again, what is the matter with you? Don't you know it? If you want to make public colleges and universities tuition free, oh my goodness, that can't happen. Well, I am happy to tell you that all over this country, that is exactly what states and cities and communities are doing. Just last month, New Mexico said that any resident in their state can go tuition-free to their public colleges and universities. And again, I want to make the point that this is not a radical idea. Does anyone think making public colleges and universities tuition-free is radical? It's common sense. All right, the world has changed. K through 12 is no longer good enough for public education. All right, so what we are going to do is make public colleges and universities tuition-free. And by the way, maybe it's time to cancel all student debt in this country. Now, see, once again, people will say, Bernie, that's a radical idea. It's an expensive proposition, which it is. And I say, and again, think outside of the box. 11 years ago, the U.S. Congress, against my vote, bailed out the crooks on Wall Street. A couple of years ago, Trump and his friends gave over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% in large profitable corporations. Right now, we are providing hundreds of billions of dollars a year in tax breaks and subsidies for.
And I say again, think outside the box, inside of a box. Because look at how the rich finance all of their stuff, okay? We can do this by simply modifying the financial system. I mean, we can create money just like they're creating money for billionaires for government programs. And we can do it easily because the amount of money that they produce for themselves compared to the amount that's needed for building this country, which again I say increases assets, therefore paying for itself, is minuscule. And it's just time to do that. It's time to take back our economic system. They create money for themselves. It's time for us to create money for us. You know what I mean? And every bit of money that we create for ourselves will go back into the economy. You know? There's no way that you can say that it's going to hurt rich people, because they're going to do just fine. They're going to continue to make money. As a matter of fact, I think that my understanding understanding of macroeconomics completely explains that it actually benefits them.
The fossil fuel industry. And by the way, we now spend more on the military than the next 10 nations combined. So I kind of think if we could bail out the crooks on Wall Street, we can now...
And that says everything about creating peace. And I firmly believe Bernie will do that. I think that we need to reach out to all of our enemies all around the world, that they have legitimate grievances against us, and address those grievances and bring peace to the world. And that in itself will end poverty all around the world.
Ask them to pay a modest tax on Wall Street speculation, which will provide all of the money we need to make public colleges and universities tuition-free and cancel student debt.
And like I say, if we thought outside of the box, we wouldn't even need their money. You know, you could let them choke on their money.
I have talked to many young people. I've talked to many young people who hesitate getting married, hesitate having kids, hesitate buying a home or even a car because they are paying off those onerous debts every single month. Let us end that.
I mean, you can't get rock out of a hard place, right? Can't get blood out of a stone. Trying to take money out of the American people is a waste of time. You're just decreasing our wealth. We need to build new wealth.
Four years ago, I came to New Hampshire and I said, maybe it might be a good idea if the United States did what every other major country on earth does, and that is guarantee health care to all people as a right, not a privilege. Once again, I was told that this is a very radical idea, because last year the healthcare industry, the insurance companies and the drug companies and others, made over $100 billion in profits. So this is the system, the dysfunctional, wasteful, and cruel.
And here's where I disagree with Bernie, okay? Like I say, think outside of his box, which is inside the box. Okay? We don't need their money. We don't need to tax them or anything. Just let them have their money and choke on it. Because we can create all of these things through existing instruments. All right? If you leave the for-profit healthcare intact, just leave it there, how many hundreds of millions of Americans are going to switch over to free healthcare? Who's going to pay their premiums when they can get a better healthcare system in the Medicare for All expanded, right? The answer is none, and they're all going, the for-profit healthcare is going to have to feed off of itself. It's going to have to fend for itself. So let it, you know. For the people who have millions and billions and want to spend that money on health insurance, they'll be in a very small pool that has to provide for itself. It won't last 5 minutes after Medicare for All. They will lose all the people in the United States who they're sucking off of. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, this big fight about whether to leave the for-profit healthcare, their hospitals will go out of business, and we'll be able to pick them up for pennies on fractions of pennies on the dollar, and incorporate them into the new, because they won't be able to maintain them. They won't be able to keep them. And if they do it artificially, just to be mean, then we'll just carry on, and sooner or later they'll see the folly of their investment.
System we now have, and some of the speakers before I got up here talked about some aspects of that. Here's where you're at. Number one, we spend twice as much per person on healthcare, $11,000 a year, as do the people.
But then they'll be the only ones spending twice, 1,000,000 times on healthcare. And they won't be the envy of the rest of the people on Medicare for All. As a matter of fact, we'll be the envy of them. So, don't worry about that. Don't get bogged down in these insane arguments that make no sense. They don't have any basis in reality.
Of any other country. So people say, Bernie, how are you going to pay for it? Man, we are already paying for it big time. So what do we get? What do we get? We're spending twice as much as our Canadian neighbors and other countries that provide health care to all people. This is what you get. You have 87 million people in this country who are uninsured or underinsured. Sometimes politicians forget about the underinsured. But what underinsured means is you may not go to the doctor when you need to go to the doctor because you don't have the out-of-pocket money that you need to deal with your deductible or your copayment. And in America today, we don't talk about it, some 30,000 people die every year because they don't get the medical care they need when they need it. And then on top of that, and I want you to think about this when you think outside of the box. I want you to think about this for a moment. In America now, it's not only that we have so many people uninsured and underinsured, what happens to a working class person who gets diagnosed with cancer or some serious illness and ends up in the hospital for a month? They're going to come out in all likelihood with, 100,000, whatever it may be, in medical bills. How do you pay that when you are a working class person without a strong health insurance program? And the answer is you don't. And the answer is that some 500,000 Americans every year go bankrupt. You got it? They go bankrupt because they cannot pay their medical bills. That's right. Their lives, or they lose their credit scores, get destroyed. They can't borrow money. But think about it. If anybody in this room, God forbid, came down with a serious health issue, you got enough to worry about getting back your feet back on the ground. You got enough to worry about what doctor you're going to go to, what therapy you do, what medicine you use. A lot to worry about. You should not have to worry about your family going into financial ruin for the crime of what? Being diagnosed with cancer. That is totally disgraceful and not what this country should be about. Now, and on top of all of that, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. You all know that? A couple of months ago, I went to Canada with some people who were diabetic. We bought insulin, same product, for 1/10 the price that it is charged here in America, and meanwhile, 1/4 of the people who use insulin ration their use, which is a horrible thing to have to do. And that is why we are going to take on the greed and the corruption of the pharmaceutical industry. All of you are aware that right now, a number of drug companies who manufacture opioids are being sued for many, many billions of dollars. Understand, and I know this state has been hit particularly hard in terms of the opioid epidemic. But I want you to understand what these companies did. It's one thing when you make a mistake. Everybody makes a mistake. When you don't know what your product does. They knew that their product was causing addiction and death. And you know what they did? They hired more salesmen to go out and push that product even more aggressively. That is a criminal activity, and we're going to hold them accountable. And I want you to think again outside of the box. Now, it is not just that we have a president who thinks that climate change is a hoax. That is dangerously pathetic. It is that right now, climate change is causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. There was a report just came out yesterday, and it talks about the fact that before the year 2050, 30 years from now, many cities around the world, major cities, will be underwater, displacing about 150 million people. And I don't have to tell you what's going on in California right now. It's unbelievable that you have wildfires that are raging, where electricity is being turned off, leaving people cope as best they can. You're talking about extreme weather disturbances. We're talking about the acidification of the ocean. We're talking about drought all over the world, heat waves all over the world. And I am, given that context, I am proud to tell you that we have introduced a climate change proposal which simply does one thing. It listens to the scientists.
So, we can listen to him all day long, but the fact is that he does have it down. He has it figured out. But he doesn't understand how to sell this to conservatives who control the minds through propaganda, through lying to the American people. He hasn't figured out how to do that. And I'm telling you, Bernie, man, tell America, and it'll get around to the conservatives, that you have no intention of tearing them down. That you want to leave them, because in the end, if we just leave them to their own devices, they'll crush themselves. We need to feel like isolationists. They talk about 50% of this country who are making like under $30,000 or less, as in the poor, and all of those people combined are like over 150 million people. So if we isolate ourselves to them, the last time I saw, about the most the president, I think Barack got like 75 million people to vote for him. We can get 150 million people to vote for Bernie if we just go after those people who make under $30,000 or under 32,000 is the figure I remember seeing. An easy win. an easy win. So, and then on top of that, if we stop threatening the 150 plus million who make over that, and stop threatening their source of income, which is the ultra rich, and we should be able to get a lot of them too. Leave that portion of the country alone. Let them have their insane dream of feeding off, being vultures on the other 50% of the country. We can do this, man. We can do this. Oh, I've got the big one viewer, the guy from the 50% that makes more than that, who's always on here. How about we do some sharing here? I'd also like to see who I'm sharing to here. So I'll go to okay, let's see if anybody shows up. See if we get a few people coming in now. You never know, we might. Ah, there's one. Welcome to the show. We've been watching Bernie's New Hampshire rally, and I've been talking about thinking outside of the box within a box. How maybe if we're not so threatening to a lot of people in the United States, all we need, there's 150 million people making under $32,000 a year in this country. If we could get 150,000 people to vote for Bernie, that would be twice as many people as voted for Barack Obama. So I was discussing that.
maybe some people think it is a radical idea to listen to science. I don't. Now, I've been criticized, like every day, for this proposal because it's a very expensive proposal. It really is. But I want you all to think about it. If we are talking about the survival of planet Earth, you tell me what the alternative is. How much is it worth to make sure that our kids and grandchildren and future generations have a planet that is healthy and habitable? I don't know how you put a price tag on that. This is the future of the planet. I'm glad to tell you that we are working with folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And I say, think outside of the box, inside of the box, and realize that when you save the planet, you're actually creating wealth. I mean, tell me what you think is more valuable. A planet without pollution, with a thriving economy, or a planet that's falling apart because of pollution. So where is the cost in that? You know, this economic system is just an illusion. The results are what matters. I mean, you can say, okay, 100 billion here, a trillion here, 50 million here. You know, you're not talking about the actual state of things. So I'd like you all to start thinking in terms of real wealth. So you have a planet with hundreds of millions, billions, I don't know, or think of the United States, 150 million living below $32,000 a year, people in debt up to their ears, people who are uneducated because they can't afford an education, people who are sick because they can't afford the healthcare system that's in place. Okay, well, what's more wealthy? A country where people are not sick because they can go to the doctor, people where people aren't in debt up to their eyeballs, a people where they can afford to put food on the table, a house, a roof over their heads, and transportation to where they need to go to do things. Which is more wealthy? I mean, how is having a small percentage of people who are ultra wealthy and the rest of the population languishing in debt and not able to pay for things, how is that more wealthy than a country that I described? Well, how we define wealth is based upon the ultra-rich illusion that they pass off onto us. We need to stop thinking not only within the box, but within the box, inside the box, inside the box. Money is just an illusion. You know, we can create as much of it as we want. What we have to do is produce a system that produces and distributes what the people need, and then to a lesser extent what they want. But I really don't think that's going to be a problem. You know, if you're worried about your Xbox, if you're worried about your luxury car or all that kind of thing, I really think those things will come within a system that takes care of its own people. I don't buy into this illusion that rich people create for us, where people are going to suffer because we take care of our own.
In implementing a Green New Deal, which will create up to 20 million good-paying jobs as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. But when we talk about the greed and corruption of the corporate establishment, I want you to think about this one as well. Drug companies knew that they were pushing a product that kills people. What do you think is going on in the boardrooms of the fossil fuel industry? Does anybody here doubt for a moment that the fossil fuel industry, ExxonMobil and the rest, absolutely knew that the product that they are producing, carbon, is in fact destroying our planet? They knew it, and yet they continue to do it more and more and more. We will hold them accountable for what they...
Okay, so anyway, let's see if we can't move on here.
Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield can help you get a great plan at a great rate. Our Medicare Advantage...
Yesterday's here.
And in fact, no, they can't. Because I've got Humanicare Source, and I've looked into all the different ones, and they're not willing to do what they say they're supposed to do, and they're not willing to translate Medicare into this for-profit system. So once you're on Obamacare, and if you're like me, you're getting it for free, they're not supposed to charge copays, but guess what? They charge copays. And I'm going to try and get off of Humanicare, and maybe Aetna or whoever will stop charging me copays. And then they're supposed to pay for over-the-counter stuff. So, like, if you want over-the-counter medications, like whatever, you know, there's tons of them. You can just go to your pharmacy and see what's outside of the little room where they make prescriptions. And your doctor says, yeah, I think it would be good for you if you could get those. Well, then the for-profit company that is supposed to be translating Medicare into the for-profit company's system will deny you every chance they get, and they will try to switch you over to what they want you to have. So, like, I have a problem with my sinuses and my nose clogging up all the time, and I'm pretty sure it's just caused by whatever, bacteria, virus, whatever, I don't really know. But and so if I use like the regular old nasal spray like Afrin, then I put it in my nose. Like right now my nose is kind of clogged up, you know what I mean? So That's me trying to breathe through my nose. Now here's trying to breathe through the left side. Can't even breathe through it. Now they have constantly moved me from, okay, this is an 88-cent bottle of nasal spray. It lasts me a minimum of 2 weeks, you know. And so I asked them to, my doctor prescribed this to me. It's an over-the-counter, and it's only 88 cents. So what does that tell you? That they're not going to make any money off of it, right? I mean, they sell this to people outside of the healthcare system, the insurance company. People go and buy it, just pay it. Okay? So, my doctor tried whatever, all these different ones, like $50 for a little bottle, maybe lasts you a week or two. Okay, I put it in my nose, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. Now I'll put this in my nose right now. Just a little bit. I'll get it to run through my nose. I'm not getting high off of it. It doesn't have any addictive qualities. But in 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be able to breathe through my nose freely. It'll open up my sinuses, and I'll be able to breathe. And I won't sound like this anymore, because when you talk with your nose clogged up, you sound like your head is made out of a brick of cement, which is how you feel too. And I'll tell you what other bad things come with this. Number one, when your nose is clogged up and you try and eat, you will accidentally breathe in food quite often. If you fall asleep, I don't know about you, but my mouth closes automatically when I'm asleep, and you'll wake up just, I don't know, just gasping for air. And also, even if your nose is slightly clogged, it's like your lungs labor to breathe. So, any way you look at it, this problem I have, which I think most Americans have, because I think that this is caused by natural bacteria which we have floating around in the air, whatever, what do you call it? I can't think of the word right now, but where you've got living stuff that is not natural in any way. I mean, we should be free of it, but they can't figure out how to do that, right? So this is a solution, and I really think they don't like that. But mainly, they want you to pay for their stuff that doesn't work, that costs $20, $30, $40, $50 a bottle, because they get to charge Medicare for that, and they get to make loads of money off of it. And I actually had, when I was on, I forget, Edna or whatever, had a suit, a guy in a suit and tie down in Houston send me a letter saying he wouldn't approve an 88-cent bottle of nasal spray over the counter. You talk about, and this is against the recommendation of my doctor and me. You know, I have a laboratory right here at home. It's called My Body, and I know how it works, or when it doesn't work, right? You know when it doesn't work. But I'm going to have some suit in Houston and sitting in an office decide that I can't have what I need because it doesn't improve his bottom line. So we're not just going to have to provide health care to people, but we're going to have to change the system. Because the system is that the doctors and the administrators and the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies, they don't give a shit about us. We're going to have to create a system that does give a shit about us. That's just a simple fact. So even when we get Medicare for all and everything, we're still going to have to find a way to regulate it and create the Medicare system that we need to help us. You know, I mean, getting the for-profit people out of it is the main thing. That'll solve a lot of problems. But once we do that, I mean, I think you're going to have to face the fact that the system that's out there, these hospitals and administrators and insurance and pharmaceuticals, well, we can get the insurance companies out of it, but they're all going to do everything they can do to try and remain above us all, you know, have lots of money and stuff like that. And I don't have a problem with them being paid well. But what's going on is way beyond that, you know. Way beyond. I mean, basically you've got layer and layer of people trying to leech off of the system. So, I mean, if we have to build all new hospitals and train all new doctors and create the companies to supply all the new supplies, then that's what we'll have to do. But we've got to fix this. It's just too much of a mess.
Hearings, Mark Zuckerberg was questioned quite harshly by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about the ability of politicians to lie in their ads. And Zuckerberg said, look, you may not like it.
I didn't think she was harsh. She just asked questions and he couldn't answer them. I'm sure he didn't want to answer them, right? I mean, you could see him kind of trying. He kept stopping to try and figure out what kind of answer he could come up to with that would, you know, cover his ass. And I think quite often that was where he got stuck, right? Because he couldn't really think of a good answer, one that would fool her. So Facebook, for sure, needs to become a utility because so many people use it to communicate, like as email basically for their friends, instant messaging. You can have telephone conversations on Facebook with your friends. Really, in the end, Facebook's probably going to replace, to a certain extent, the telephone companies. Probably, you know, where people go. For sure, Facebook and YouTube. You know, they're going to replace entertainment. So you're going to be able to go on YouTube and listen to all the bands you like to listen to, and you can't watch all the shows you want to listen to yet. But I'm pretty sure that will come too. I mean, there's no reason why broadcast TV shouldn't be over the internet, right? I mean, it's broadcast TV, right? It's free to your home. It's just coming over the airwaves. So, why not get those waves out of the air and do it over the internet? So, if it's going to provide all these essential basic services, and then on top of that provide a lot of the more profitable services and stuff that people pay for, then isn't it going to have to be regulated? And like I've said before, being a private company does not free you from following the laws. So it doesn't free you from providing freedom of speech and all these other things. They seem to want to believe that. I mean, how godlike is that, right? Oh, I'm not bound by the laws of the country because I own the company. Isn't that stupid? Seems stupid to me. Okay, well, this stuff is starting to work, but it hasn't really gotten very far yet, but it will. Anyway, Zuckerberg personally makes me sick. I'm pretty sure he ripped off his friends when he started his company, but you know what? They were jerks too, so that's not really part of it. But he was the jerk of the jerks, right? King of the jerks. Managed to screw his other jerk friends out of their part in creating Facebook. And I don't see, if some dumbass like Zuckerberg, I don't know if he wrote the platform or if most of it was written over time by his flunkies who joined the company. But if he can do it, why can't we have 50 Facebooks out there? Everybody could join 1, 2, or 3 of them, and they could do everything that they do on Facebook. Sit on my Facebook.
Chicago, Illinois, wealthiest city in the Midwest, home of the Chicago Stock Exchange, which trades in livestock and meat market securities. Not that kind of meat market. I do love that place, though. Yes, thank you. Every day, hundreds of brokers compound the city's riches by speculating on Chicago's Italian beef sandwich.
Okay, so he's trying to be funny, but it eventually gets around to talking about something of substance.
You gotta let Mayor Lori work that light-footed magic. She wants to improve Chicago public schools, too. She just needs some time for you to work without a contract so she can get around to it. And she believes all the same things you do. Just look at what she campaigned on. An elected representative school board rather than one appointed by the mayor, a freeze on charter school expansion, strong investments in public schools. She even told the Chicago Sun-Times, as mayor, I will provide each school with basic educational support positions like librarians, nurses, social workers. These are the CTU's own contract demands in the strike. Now that she's in office and none of that stuff is happening is exactly the time to trust her. The reason that Chicago public schools aren't getting the resources they need isn't because of billionaires trying to destroy public sector unions. Look, Mayor Lightfoot would love to meet the union's demands, but Chicago just doesn't have enough money. The state of Illinois did just allocate an extra $1 billion for Chicago public schools, but $1 billion just so happens to be the same amount of money needed for the brand new Lincoln Yards luxury development. I know, it seems frivolous, but we gotta think big. This kind of urban design project is the future. It's even being built out of the futures of several thousand school children. Just look at those countertops. That type of granite can only be funded by the salaries of at least 12 school nurses. According to a poll taken...
So you've got the same old thing. I mean, this is the promise of capitalism. They always tell you you have to be patient, right? Well, in my experience, the patience of the American people has a limit. And I think, 200 years of capitalism is long enough. So...
To build the city, we need to gather wood.
Hello and welcome to Common Censored. I am Lee Camp, and to all of our surprises, Eleanor is here. Eleanor Goldfield.
I made it.
With me as always.
You couldn't stop me. I know that you wanted your own show.
I know. I really was aching for my own show. But no, you got back in time, and we're going to discuss where you were in a few minutes. But by the way, this is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
Put some real zest on that one.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
We're both a little loopy, so forgive us as we dive
Loopier
into this.
than normal.
Yeah, you've been traveling endlessly for like 10 days or something, and I have just been plastering my brain for various things. Various substances I've been intaking. No, I'm kidding. Just working on the various shows and such. So we hadn't planned to cover this because we didn't know it was going to happen, but Max...
By the way, I think he probably is on various substances.
Blumenthal, who is a journalist. You all probably know him either from his writing at the Gray Zone or his books like Goliath or Management of Savagery, or the fact that I've had him on Redacted VIP probably 3 or 4 times. Great journalist, done a lot of important work, and he was arrested this past weekend at his home. The DC police did like a SWAT style raid where they surrounded his house here in DC and told him if he didn't open up and come out or whatever to be arrested, that they were going to break the door down. They then arrested him, shackled his hands and ankles, and kept him for 2 days, refusing to give him a phone call or call his lawyer. And all of this, they claim, is connected to a assault charge that he was never told about, connected to or at the Venezuelan embassy 5 months.
And I'm going to point out here that if something goes before a judge for a warrant, you should be notified and have a right to be there to defend yourself. And you should be able to raise objections and make motions right from the start. But they just tell you, no, you can't.
Months ago, when the Venezuelan Embassy Collective, which Eleanor was a part of, and I was outside on a few days, when that was going on 5 months ago, Max was not inside, but helped get food to the people inside the embassy who were, as you'll recall, holding the embassy as space on behalf of the Venezuelan government, which had asked them to do that.
And was reporting on it.
And Max was reporting on it, yeah. And at one point, helping them get food into the building because the cops weren't allowing food in. And someone, because there were a bunch of right-wing extremists outside, they would assault people, and at some point one of them claimed to the police that Max had assaulted them, but it's completely untrue, completely made up, fabricated. Max has said 100% not true.
Well, and the National Lawyers Guild actually released a statement about this, and what's interesting, the arrest warrant is not only 5 months old, but it's been previously denied. So,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, so this is in the National Lawyers Guild. If you just Google or go to nlginternational.org and search for Max Blumenthal, you'll find it, and there's a statement by the NLG. Folks might recognize them. If you've ever been to a protest, they're the folks with the bright neon green hats, and they basically observe things like this, and also, of course, step in when bullshit like this happens. But yeah, that warrant is not only 5 months old, it had been previously denied.
So, completely false charge, denied warrant, 5 months old. He's arrested in a dramatic fashion and held without a phone call. And just to give one more thing about, a bit of detail about outside of the Venezuelan embassy, is the right-wing pro-coup. These are people that claim to be pro-coup protesters outside the embassy. They were very violent and screaming racial epithets, screaming homophobic shit, anything they could do to just be cruel and upsetting. And they would, when Medea Benjamin, who's about 5'2", the creator of Code Pink, would walk on the side of the street that was allotted by the police to the pro-coup protesters, she would be surrounded. They would scream, words that I probably shouldn't even repeat on the podcast here at her. And the assault charge is this much funnier in that they would assault people and the cops would not do a thing.
They'd watch.
You could say to the cop, "This guy just assaulted me," and the cop would turn the other direction. But if the anti-coup peace protesters, the peaceful activists, Code Pink, etc., were to knock the bullhorn out of their ear or push someone out of the way who was intentionally trying to block their path, or even, just try and throw food up to the front, then they would get arrested by the cops. So the cops would arrest the peaceful protesters while leaving alone the kind of fascist pro-coup people. So all of this is to say Max is arrested on these completely false charges, and it seems without a doubt to have to do with his reporting.
And I want to point out to you that all of this is done openly with your tax money. Okay, these people, they're paid by different American organizations that have words like democracy and freedom and all that in their name. They get millions and millions upon millions of dollars through these organizations that claim to be about democracy and freedom. And all they're doing is funding right-wing terrorists. It's really what it comes down to. And I really think that if we lived in a country where there was justice, instead of getting millions, they would be prosecuted, because they would switch over from tax dollars to privately funded. And it would be like the Wahhabi banks, these people who fund terrorists, although I think I identify more with the terrorists than with the right-wing terrorists, because I see terrorist organizations as basically people fighting for oppressed, murdered peoples just going too far, right? They become terrorists. And I mean, these organizations that are funded right through our Congress, they're actively paying people who commit terrorist acts. And I'm sure you could find that out if you wanted to.
He has been, the Gray Zone has been very successful. I would argue the most successful American outlet.
And unfortunately, the Gray Zone has gotten off tilt when it comes to supporting the beast Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and that's to their detriment. And I'm sure sooner or later, if they start truly doing the investigative journalism that they claim to do, and that they do in terms of countries like Nicaragua and Venezuela, and that they need to do in El Salvador and Guatemala and places like that, that they will find out that they're on the wrong side of that. They're on the right side in terms of trying to go after American, these regime change wars. And, in terms of the Beast Bashar, I think that's a good regime change war, except for the fact that they're not doing it to help the people of Syria. They're doing it to install American backed dictatorships, which in the end don't do anything for the people. But I love Max, but he's got this one. He doesn't represent the other side of his story. He doesn't talk about the people in Syria, the millions that have been displaced and become refugees, because we're all supposed to hate every Sunni in the world, that they're all terrorists and all this kind of crap. So let's go ahead and look at what's happening in Syria today. So you got the Russians and Russian-backed and Beast Bashar-backed people just bombing, and the United States goes in there and bombs one people and one guy, and his followers. But when do they report? When does the American media talk about all this? I mean, they're just bombing Idlib into the Stone Age. And we're supposed to call these people terrorists, right? So opposition factions announced the destruction of a tank and missiles, and they killed a bunch of Beast Bashar's men and American-trained Iranian militias that operate out of Iraq. That's got to make that's got to be cringeworthy, right? And then you get, these guys doing the, I don't know if you can call them IS, because I suppose, they are trying to take back their country, therefore they're trying to produce in a kind of an Islamic state, but at the same time, they're doing what little they can do against a totally well-armed, high-tech military. So IS confirmed the death of its leader, and these things just stick around forever, showing us the results of the bombing. I don't think anybody really cares, to see some rubble and maybe a hole in the ground. And of course, what the Turkish President Erdogan's trying to do is create and maintain this area and expand it. I'm sure he's trying to expand it. And in the meantime, I haven't seen anybody reporting on how the U.S. is flooding back into northern Syria. See them here and here. And of course the Sunni don't really want them in there, so they're messing with them. And you've got all this where the Turks are expanding into other areas, and I think they will continue to do that. They're meeting with the Russians. They're doing everything they can to get the Russians in areas where they can't get to yet to do what they promised and create the safe zone. And hopefully they will, but I really don't have a lot of hope for that. What's happening down here? So the Sunnis outside of the Turks and the Turkish-backed Sunni forces are doing it on their own because they don't want to see it stall. So they're jumping on their little motorcycles with explosive vests and stuff and attacking the Syrian army. And what's going on down here? Yeah. You know, Trump is not withdrawing forces. If anything, he's quadrupling down. So that's what's really going on in Syria right now.
Reporting on the coup regime, Juan Guaido and the others that have been trying to overthrow Maduro in Venezuela, reporting on the U.S. connections to all of this and the individuals involved. And the biggest story that they had recently was they actually got, I can't remember his name, it starts with a, I think it's Houseman maybe. They actually got him to resign as the economics minister of the coup regime. Now, this coup regime pretends they're the government of Venezuela when they're not. They have no power, but they like to say they do. So they're pretending they're the government of Venezuela, and they have an economics minister. And he is a professor at Harvard as well. And
yeah, you know, Guido is just what he sounds like. Just a mafioso. He's well connected with Colombia drug cartels. And why does that not surprise me in the least, right?
If you manage a team, you should be using Monday.com. It's a platform to manage any team and any project.
hello, everybody. Welcome to.
Can I use Tuesday.com? I like Tuesday better.
A moment of clarity. I'm Lee Camp. I want to talk about the Exxon lawsuit that is going through right now. There's a major lawsuit going through in New York against Exxon and the oil sands, and they're going on trial in New York City about climate fraud. Now here's what's kind of funny is you're like, you and me, we think, oh yeah, they should be fucking sued for lying to us, for lying to the nation about the harm that climate change could cause, because they've known about this for a fucking generation. They've known about climate change was coming. They knew about it in the late 70s at least.
Same old, right? I mean, this is nothing new. We know that the rich do everything to, and they don't care about the side effects of their creating wealth for themselves, right?
A gas stove has exploded on a train in Pakistan, sparking a huge fire that killed at least 70 people. Survivors recorded what happened as the flames tore through several carriages. The train was on its way from Karachi to Rawalpindi, which is just outside Islamabad.
What can I tell you? Ignorant people doing things in ignorant ways, and at some point along the line, lots of people pay the price.
people in Spain have staged yet another pro-independence rally in Barcelona as calls for the right to self-determination grow louder in Catalonia.
And, you know, I mean, normally I would not agree with secessionists because you got like a lot of people down in Texas who would like to secede. But at the same time, it may be the same thing in Barcelona because you've got a wealthier area who wants to secede so they don't have to help out with the rest of the country. But then you've got the other side of it where you've got the regime, basically the same Franco regime, working to, they want to create wealth in their areas and suck off of other wealthy areas, but you know, none of them are really interested in the people. So this is in Mexico, and you know, I just see this. It's just the same everywhere. Everybody's fighting over money, right? It just doesn't work for me. Back to Turkey here.
Turkey's now carried out 3 successful operations in northern Syria to clear its border of YPG and Daesh terrorists and to create a safe zone in the area. But this is not the only reason Turkey has wanted to establish a safe zone. You see, ever since the war in Syria broke out, Turkey opened its doors to millions of Syrians, and today it hosts nearly 4 million refugees. It is estimated that the nearly 9-year-long war in Syria has killed over 500,000 people, and at least 6 million are internally displaced, while around 5 million had to flee their country. Turkey has been calling on the international community to create a safe zone on its border for years, and it has finally managed to do so by taking matters into its own hands. In 2015, Syria was in complete turmoil with YPG and Daesh claiming large areas. But in 2016, as things were getting even worse in Syria, Turkey decided to carry out an operation to liberate areas that were being terrorized by Daesh and YPG. Here are some of the things Turkey managed to do in Operation Euphrates Shield. Areas such as Jarablus, El Rey, El Bab and Azaz were cleared from terrorists. With the help of Turkey, 260,000 refugees managed to return home. 3 new hospitals were constructed in El Rey, El Bab and Mar. Turkey's education ministry renovated.
So you'll hear a lot of bullshit about the YPG and they're being displaced now by Turkey, and the Sunnis who are refugees coming back in, and you know, where were they in the first place? Did they live there? So just hold off on your feeling sorry for them until we find out exactly, you know, who's who and what's where, because Turkey's absolutely right about what they're talking about here. They're rebuilding for the Sunni community. So they are putting in all this like education and hospitals and stuff. And things are much better in the safe zones they create. So like in these areas, except for the occasional YPG terrorist attack, which is what Turkey's been dealing with for, you know, 40 years or something. So other than that, you've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Sunni getting their lives back. And in the meantime, up here in Turkey, you've got the Turkish people feeling some kind of pinch. They're saying that, you know, their economy's being ruined because so much money is going into taking care of the refugees, and there's just no room for them economically. And that's why Erdogan lost a lot of seats in his parliament, because the people of Syria voted in, opposition. And now this is what he's doing this out of pressure from his own people to get the refugees out of the country.
458 schools, while 152,000 children started school again. And finally, Turkey's Haran University announced that there will be a faculty in Elbab where trilingual education in Turkish, Arabic and English will be provided. Then in 2018, Turkey conducted another operation, and with Operation Olive Branch, Turkey managed to clear out Afrin, which was occupied by YPG, help 150,000 refugees return to the area, and renovate damaged schools and hospitals. Turkey's Gaziantep University also announced that they would open up faculties in liberated areas. Islamic Sciences faculty in Azaz, Education faculty in Afrin, and a faculty of Economics and Administrative Sciences in Elbab. And this brings us to Turkey's latest anti-terror operation. Amid a barrage of misinformation that was targeting the Kurds, Turkey launched Operation Peace Spring to clear YPG terrorists and create a 480-kilometer long, 32-kilometer wide safe zone in northern Syria after US forces withdrew from the area. US forces here were backing and arming YPG terrorists against Daesh. As the campaign progressed, Turkey and the US agreed that the operation would be paused for the withdrawal of YPG terrorists from the planned safe zone area, and that Turkey would have the planned safe zone south of the Turkish.
And I'm going to be brutally honest with you, okay? This safe zone will never be big enough for Turkey, because let's say you create a safe zone here and you put 1 million Syrians in there, and then you'll find out that the YPG, that the Kurds are attacking that safe zone and infiltrating that safe zone and still moving freely between Syria and Turkey. So they'll need another safe zone and another one and another one. And Erdogan's already talked about pushing the Kurds all the way out of Syria, right out through here, and even pushing them out of Iraq. Because when the Turks get bombed with, Kurdish terrorists bomb and attack, the fact is that the source of all that terrorism goes all the way into Iraq, and they would like Erdogan to solve that problem. So basically they want to create a safe zone that goes all the way over here into Iran. And I think eventually they'll attack the Kurds in Iran too. I mean, they're just being pragmatic, right?
Border in Syria. Days after that deal, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, and this is what they agreed on. Russia will remove YPG elements and weapons from outside of the Operation Peace Spring area, as well as from Manbij and Tal Rifat. Russian-Turkish joint patrols will also commence, and the status quo of the 32-kilometer Operation Peace Spring area between Tel Abyad and Ras Al Ain will be protected. So now that the safe zone is established, what will happen? Before Operation Peace Spring started, Turkey said it aims to resettle at least 3 million refugees back into Syria.
Okay, but the fact is it hasn't really been established, because I don't think that the Russian military police, which are the ones who are coming in here, I don't think they're going to be able to clear it. But maybe with the help of, maybe with joint Turkish-Russian patrols, maybe they'll be able to get it, right? But I can tell you that as long as the Kurds are in places like this, see the Syrian Sunni are attacking the Kurds in places like this. So this is a really volatile situation, and there's no telling where it's going to end up. And it might be years and years and years.
Turkey stated it is committed to rebuilding infrastructure in northern Syria. The initial plan is to resettle 1 million refugees and reconstruct 10 districts, as well as 140 villages. Each village would consist of 100 houses, and each house would have more than 10,000 square feet of farmland. There are plans to establish more university faculties.
So, you know, what it comes down to is there's 20 million Syrian Sunni, right? And they're going to try and cram them into all this area, and all that's going to happen is the Beast Bashar army and the Russians, even with their own people in there patrolling, a few military police, they're going to start attacking them like they do down here in Idlib. I mean, isn't it obvious they're never going to be satisfied? And the Beast Bashar has already said that, you know, he wants all Syrian territory under his control again. And of course he does, because he doesn't want democratic elections. And what's he going to do? He's going to, if all these millions of people are allowed to vote up there, they're going to want to form their own country, because they're not going to be satisfied being under, you know, a fake dictate or a fake democracy. It's nuts. I'll tell you what, I mean, if I had my way, the Turks would just come in and take the whole country and knock off the Beast Bashar and institute democracy. The biggest democracy in the Middle East is Turkey. Whether anybody tells you otherwise, they're full of shit. You know, the fact that the Sunnis have control in Turkey is proof that it's a democracy. Because my friend and a guy in Intel in Turkey, who I went to school with in high school, they controlled the whole country until there were free and fair elections, until the Turkish military didn't feel like it could openly have a fake democracy. And at that point, the Turkish people voted. And, you know, even the Kurds have gotten several seats in parliament now, because they do have a democracy, a working democracy now. You know, you might hear about a little bit of people complaining, saying that there's voter fraud or election fraud, but really, for the most part, the proof is in the pudding. They do have a democracy. Otherwise, all these people who've been underrepresented in the past, while there's been military dictatorships and stuff, or pretend democracies, are getting to vote. I mean, it's as simple as that. You know, you really have to look at what's really happening. So when you see people winning in elections who are on the other side, that's proof that there's an actual democracy at work.
And sporting facilities for the youth. This final project is expected to cost Turkey around $27 billion, and in total, Turkey has spent $40 billion on refugees. There will also be a second phase of this project where another 1 million refugees will be resettled, and it is estimated that the whole project will cost $53 billion. So, will Turkey be left alone in reconstructing northern Syria, or will the international community step up?
And isn't it obvious that they're going to need more land than that? And isn't it obvious that Sunni, not only in Beast Bashar's control down here and in Kurdish control here, are going to continue to fight? And yes, they're probably going to be even more, wanting to fight because they see Turkey on the other side of that line, and they see Syria and Russia, Beast Bashar, having to deal with them, and it frees them up to fight inside their own areas. So, as soon as this stuff evolves, I'm pretty sure that you'll see uprisings again, like the ones that took almost all of Syria over against the Beast Bashar. And I'd like to know more about these massive demonstrations in the Bekaa, because that's mostly Shia in there. I thought this was interesting, but I haven't watched it yet, so let's watch it.
This is how Dong Chin makes a living. She sells knickknacks and second-hand goods at what's known as a ghost market on the outskirts of Beijing. It's given that name because every Tuesday after dark, this open space between shops and restaurants comes alive. Under the glow of handheld torches, buyers look for bargains until the early hours of the morning, as vendors spend the night flogging their goods.
And by the way, British call flashlights torches, so you won't see any flames coming off or anything.
I think most antique lovers still prefer going to offline markets. It's costly to sell and buy antiques online because you need to pay tax and other expenses to the platform, while street markets are all free.
Ghost markets date back to the Qing dynasty, which ran from the 1600s to the 20th century. It was traditionally where people could exchange valuable possessions for money under the cover of darkness to hide their identity. Today you can find everything from popular jade.
Isn't it kind of funny to look at all the ways that the people who suffer under capitalism try and come up with ways to survive or improve their lives, and the ways that the capitalists come up with to try and keep them from doing that? And only in China, where you have a legacy of communism, are any of these things allowed to survive, because they actually care about the people who are, fighting for their little piece of the pie. Wow, look at all that jade, huh? Sometimes I wonder if it's all real, couldn't you just make a piece of green plastic and sell it?
Ornaments to Bluetooth headphones. But this particular market is said to be the last of its kind.
Most of the traders here have gone out of business and gone back to their hometown. Some of them have made a lot of money, while others can't even earn a living.
Chin says she pays around $20 to rent the space for her stall, but sometimes she won't sell anything for 2 weeks.
And when eBay was, back in 2000 or so, and they used to sell a lot of the stuff, and it wasn't taxed either. So, you could buy a lot of it, like jade knickknacks and stuff, and get some really good deals. But now they've made sure that it's taxed twice now. not only do you pay a sales tax, but with Trump and his tariffs, they're another tax. And, you know, while it may hurt the seller, like in China or wherever, because he's going to have a harder time selling it because it's more expensive, it's actually the buyer who's paying the taxes.
This man has been coming here for 7 years. He says he travels some 1,500 kilometers from Gansu to sell his items, but it's getting tougher. Many locals now come here just to browse. It's also become a tourist attraction for those willing to make the trip out of the city centre late at night. Traders tell me they often hear rumours. People are talking about how this ghost market will be forced to close down like others in Beijing which have fallen victim to development. For now at least, surrounding businesses appear to support the ghost market and even benefit from it. Traders like Chin are hopeful the government will keep it open and not let it slip into the darkness for good. Samantha Vardas, TRT World, Beijing.
Some people who migrate from Ethiopia and Somalia to Saudi Arabia find work and make money to support their families. But human rights groups say that's rare. Many of the tens of thousands who make the sea voyage from Djibouti end up imprisoned for ransom by smugglers in Ras Al Arab, a town on Yemen's southern coast.
We left the boat and armed men came to us. They asked us for contact numbers in Saudi Arabia or Ethiopia, or any contact for our families. When we refused...
Yeah, just the total mismanagement of populations, right? I mean, nobody's making sure that these people have what they need in the countries where they're at and build up an economy that takes care of itself, right? So, and again, this is the promise of capitalism. You know, a job for everybody. You can make 3 cents an hour if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Oh, the total nonsense, huh, of the capitalists. Their promises are just, you know, smoke and mirrors, and as soon as the little wind comes in, it's all wafted away, and we can see what's really going on. And the suffering, right? The result is suffering. Because if we didn't have capitalism, we'd come up with another solution, right? We'd have some kind of system to provide for people.
To give the contacts, they started to torture us. They beat us and raped us for 15 days.
According to the International Organization for Migration, nearly 160,000 people landed in Yemen last year, a 50% increase from 2017. Migrant rights groups say it's one of the fastest growing migrant routes in the world.
Don't you think it's kind of strange that a country that's being bombed the shit out of by Saudi Arabia is a magnet for people? Let's all rush in where bombs are falling. Does that really exemplify the, you know, the total mismanagement by the capitalist system? Obviously, but it just shows how I don't know, how crazy the world is, right? Hey, I got an idea. Things are so bad here. Let's all move to a war zone. I did that once. Didn't work out very well.
World. Abdul Yassin was locked up with others for 5 months. His smugglers used rocks to crush his fingers.
When we asked for water, they wouldn't give us any. They said only when we get the money. They didn't even give us food. They would leave us for days without food or water, and then they'd give us some dry crumbs.
And despite their horrific risks, mixedmigration.org reports cross-border migration on this route is increasing.
I only think about what's next, and I don't look backward. Even if they hit me, I don't even say, "Why are you hitting me?" I only think about Saudi Arabia in front of me. I want Mecca, I want war.
EU-funded crackdowns on smuggling and borders only funnel them to more dangerous options. They say any opportunity to find a better life is worth the risks. Sarah Balter, TRT World.
You know, you just don't see these kind of stories in the American media. I mean, I just felt starved for information before the internet, and even after the internet. And now I can go to places like TRT and Press TV, even though Press TV is so biased it's not funny. But you can pick out what you need to know.
Here's another story. Denmark has given...
And so, you know, even though I don't much care for Rick Sanchez, his reporting is just second rate. But anyway, but you notice that there's no ads before RT and TRT. That's because they don't monetize their videos.
Been the go-ahead for the Russian firm to lay miles of pipeline into its territorial waters. This is part of Nord Stream 2, a gas pipeline that will funnel fuel from Russia into Europe. Big deal, right? This pipeline's obviously providing a boost to the Russian economy, but also to the economies of gas beneficiaries like Germany. By the way, at 759 miles in length, this undersea pipeline will deliver almost 2 trillion cubic feet of gas per year. That's a record. Joining us now, former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. How big a deal is this? Denmark says, hey, you know what? You can go ahead and do this.
It's a big deal. It's not a complete surprise, but it is a big deal. Rick, there's a specter haunting Washington. The specter is called decoupling. That what American policymakers have always been afraid of, and I think increasingly afraid of, as a lot of Europeans see that their economic interests and political interests don't necessarily line up with those of Washington and NATO, is to say, why shouldn't we have greater commerce with the Russians? Why aren't we a natural customer for their energy? And we know there was a lot of jawboning from the Trump administration trying to stop this thing. You know, no, you don't need that Russian gas. You can buy our much more expensive Freedom gas that we'll ship over with as LNG, and you know,
and we'll give you some fries to go along with it.
And some countries that are like Poland, for example, are buying that line, but the Germans are, I think, a little smarter than
Well, listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I can figure something like this out, right? So this script right here is Russia, right?
Yeah.
And this pen right here is Europe, right? Last time I checked, Europe is next to Russia, but to get from the United States to Europe, you've got this cup of, by the way, this is non-alcoholic.
It's a pond, I believe.
There's an Atlantic Ocean here, so it behooves the pen to be able to get things from right here without having to go all over the world to get it from over here, right? It just makes sense for the Europeans.
Well, obviously, you're not a geostrategist. That if the issue is political control, and that also means financial and economic control, you don't want them buying the gas from that little piece of paper right there. You want them to buy it from this piece of paper, which we control, and then they are basically under us.
But here's the irony of this. I mean, it really is interesting to look at a situation like this where we have all these pro-market guys, right? All the guys who are free market. We want the whole world to just enjoy the benefits of how the market works. This is a market force in action. The Russians are saying, we're not the Soviet Union, we now do commerce, and this is our way of doing commerce with Europe. Why the hell would we stop that?
Unfortunately, Rick, all that talk is just that. It's just rhetoric. You'd think right after the Soviet Union fell apart and we had a non-communist Russia, we'd say, great, play by the same rules everybody else does. Let's get into the stream of commerce. You just everything you said. From the very beginning in the 1990s, we had a policy coming from the State Department of trying to cut off Russian gas exports to Europe. Why do you think they built the Baku-Ceyhan pipeline through Turkey so we could have Caspian gas coming from Azerbaijan coming to Europe, coming into to the customers to the west? Because we didn't want them to buy Russian gas, and we also had the problem, for example, that the main pipelines are running through Ukraine, and that becomes who holds the hand on the spigot issue.
There's a caveat or a side note here, and that is while most people are saying, oh, look, Trump's being punishing, or the U.S. is punishing Russia once again, are they really going after Russia? Because who they're really punishing are European countries like Germany, who really need that gas for what, especially what they do, which is car manufacturing, right?
Absolutely, and that's the thing where you can only push some of these Europeans so far, and they'll talk a good fight, the Russian aggression in Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to their bread and butter issue, Deutschmarks and Pfennig, they know how to add, and they see that what the Americans are offering them just doesn't add up.
Well said. That's a good conversation once again. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Bye, Jim.
Okay, but what have they not said? And that is that Ukraine was part of Russia for 50, 75 years, something, right? And I would say at least half of Ukrainians felt very strongly about communism and the system that the Russians helped them build. I mean, they even had Russian nuclear weapons, right? Ukraine, Georgia, a couple others. And so you end up with, and unfortunately this map is owned by the right-wing fascist Ukrainians. And they will totally misrepresent this situation. But what you got is probably at least half, at least before the revolution, at least half of Ukraine in support of Russia. And they proved that in their latest election, right? They basically elected a guy who is kind of a lefty. And, you know, I look at this thing and they show the Ukrainian militias like they're bombing the shit out of the, Russian-backed Ukrainian militias, and they're bombing the shit out of innocent people across here. But I guarantee you that this isn't going on. It's not like an offensive. It's more like a defense. And they're not showing all the attacks by these fascist forces in Ukraine. Because I guarantee you that most of these forces here are these fascist militias. They've had this area surrounded from the beginning, and they just continue to pressure, but they're up against a brick wall because the Ukrainian Russians are Russian-backed and they have something to fight for, whereas these people have nothing to fight for out here. So anyway, that being said, the fascist regime here, outside of the new president, I mean, has been playing with Russia over its oil and gas all along, and now Russia's just gone around them. I mean, it's as simple as that. And they don't like it, and they're facing the possibility of Russia just shutting off shutting off the gas. So, war is war, people, and you want to fight? Well, you got a guy over here who will give it to you.
"70 years ago, on October the 1st, 1949, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Mao Zedong, stood in Tiananmen Square, pictured here, and proclaimed the establishment of the People's Republic of China, an outcome of a momentous revolutionary upheaval in the most populous country of the world. It was a monumental event in world history. The Chinese Revolution ended a century of imperialist subjugation and unified a country that had been divided for decades. On the international plane, it dealt a major blow to imperialism, which was desperately seeking to stabilise capitalism after the Second World War had devastated Europe and Asia. The United States, which had emerged as the dominant power, had fought Japan for control over China and its vast investment opportunities, markets, cheap labour and resources. The revolution, however, abruptly ended that prospect. The 1949 revolution also overturned the domination of the landlord class and moneylenders over the countryside and ended much that was socially and culturally backward and oppressive. An agrarian law in 1950 confiscated and redistributed the land of landlords. The 1950 marriage law allowed women to choose their own partners for the first time, ended polygamy, child betrothal, foot binding, and concubinage. Prior to 1949, the illiteracy rate in China was 80%, and life expectancy was just 35 years. 30 years later, illiteracy had largely been abolished, and life expectancy had nearly doubled to 65 years. The Chinese Revolution expressed the aspirations of hundreds of millions of workers, peasants, young people, and...
Pretty stark contrast, isn't it? They talk about the, economic viability of communism all the time and point to China and say how, it's ended up in dictatorship, and obviously the people were far better off because of that 30 years of communism.
Intellectuals.
No matter how much, if any, blowback from it,
For security and basic democratic and social rights after decades of social upheaval. The Chinese masses had already been through 2 revolutions, had suffered under the rule of ruthless warlords and the brutal dictatorship of the Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Japanese military occupation, first of Manchuria and then of all China. Many youth, workers, peasants had sacrificed, including with their lives, in the struggle against imperialism and its lackeys. In the working class, socialist traditions stemming from the foundation of the Communist Party in 1921 and the subsequent revolutionary upheavals was still strong. In the minds of many, the Chinese Communist Party was linked to the Stalinist regime in Moscow, which claimed, falsely, to be the continuity of the Russian Revolution of 1917, just 3 decades earlier. Yet today, no one can seriously believe that China is socialist or communist. What the regime terms socialism with Chinese characteristics, with its huge private corporations, stock markets, flood of foreign investment, and market pricing of all commodities, including wage labour, is capitalism pure and simple.
Yeah, but at the same time, communism had reached a block, right, where it couldn't seem to get around and it couldn't seem to expand its economy to take care of its people. So the communists decided they would use capitalism just in terms of pushing the economy as far as it could go. And, you know, he talks about how there's no socialism and it's pure capitalism, but you still have free health care, free education, you have a housing system that, yeah, okay, it's not as good as it could be, but it's improving. So I still believe that the communists are strong, that it's not like some kind of coup by the imperialist world, and that they're just using capitalism to create a new kind of communism. And the thing is I've always said that the result of capitalism is communism. And, you know, I can't help but think that maybe they listen to me over there, because I see people listening to me. You know, I'm on here all by myself, talking to myself. But why is it that within hours or within days or even hours of me putting out a new idea, I see other people reiterating it? You know, politicians and lefty kind of politicians and people, stuff that even like Robert Wolf doesn't come up with. So I'll talk about capitalism being communism right now, which is an idea of mine that comes out of my studies of capitalism. And you know, I mean, I learned stuff in school, but this is logic and reason beyond what I learned in school. So like, just make a main point right here. Okay, competition. In a pure capitalist system, all the people who make, say, toenail clippers, okay, all the companies, they sell their product by making, at least this is the way it should work in pure capitalism, making a better toenail clipper at a lower price, right? Or a better toenail clipper at the same price as their competition, and therefore they steal all their customers, right? Or a same quality of clipper at a lower price. In capital, when you go to school, they talk about making a better mousetrap. So let's say mousetraps, right? Doesn't really matter what you talk about. Okay, so if you're competing, then you're always lowering your price, and then your competition lowers their price, and you lower your price, and eventually you get down to a point where you either go out of business or you lower your price below their price. And if this kind of laissez-faire, as they say, you know, free market capitalism were really in existence, then you would cut your profits until you ran your competition out of business, right? But in fact, that's not what happens. What happens is you get together with all your competitors, not obviously, you don't advertise it, and you keep selling a certain percentage of your product and they keep selling certain percentage of their product, and everybody makes lots of money, right? This is why we passed all kinds of laws against monopolies and all that kind of, I can't think of the word, but antitrust laws and stuff like that, in an attempt to, I think really all that antitrust laws was an attempt to placate the people, to make them believe that you're forcing competition upon people. So capitalism really does result in communism, or something very close to it. Very low profits, you know. There's a lot of other ways which I compare capitalism to communism, like access to capital, protection of your ideas as the originator, and things like that, which capitalism's supposed to, like capital is supposed to be available for people who are a little bit smarter, and or at least come up with good plans for making a better mousetrap, right? You're supposed to, so like you come up with this mousetrap and oh, it's real cool, it's got a better new cheese, it's got a nicer mechanism for whacking out rats, and you walk into a bank and you show them what you got, and you're protected, through patents or whatever, and the availability. See, patenting ought to be free. Copyright ought to be free, so that it protects the people who come up with the ideas. But that's not how it works. You walk into a bank and you want to borrow money, and if you're not GM or somebody like that, you can forget it. I don't care if you come up with the greatest car that ever existed, the capitalist system and the fat cats at the top, they're all watching all this, and they're all doing whatever, manipulating it in their favor. And the real innovators, they all sit on the sidelines. If anything, they get their stuff stolen. That's how the progress is made. So again, capitalism in theory, awesome. Capitalism in process, in reality, sucks. It especially sucks for people like you and me. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. I'll keep it real short. But in Houston, I came up with this great idea, and I went into one of these companies, the biggest one down there, where they say, if you've got a great idea, they will bankroll you. And they took my idea and then told me I would have to come up with $3,000 to do it, which that's capitalism in practice. That's the word I was trying to think of before. And it shouldn't work that way. I mean, first of all, they shouldn't be able to bully you or con you into giving up your idea before telling you it's going to cost you $3,000, which I was poor, so it's not like I could do that. And then 2 or 3 months later, I'm watching TV, and the big toy company down there has my product. Now that's not a coincidence. They didn't just happen to think of my idea 2 or 3 months after I came into that company and presented it to them. So, You know, you wonder why people are so negative in the United States. It's because we all know that that's how things work. And we don't like it. And we're angry. I mean, I'm still angry thinking back about how that happened. You know? The only time I ever had money to invest in something, my dad gave me $1,250, and he talked me into investing it into his friend from Spain who was trying to do something that I thought was ludicrous, and that was the last I ever saw that money. Capitalism sucks, man. As a matter of fact, I've got a Facebook group called Capitalism Sucks. You might want to check it out sometime. Okay, I lived in Lebanon, and that's about Lebanon, and Halloween in space. But listen, I gotta go. So until later, I'll be live tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. And I hope you can join me. Until then, goodbye for Progressive News.